Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on the series. I am one half of your host, JB, and with me, of course, is the other half, the mighty Mark Marsh.
Hey, everybody.
So together we are BAM, and we've got an interesting topic today. I think it's going to be one that's quite topical because at the time of this being released, it should have just been the 20th anniversary of Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, which I can't believe that it's that old already. It makes me feel old personally because I still remember watching that on like the big tape. I don't think I got to that one in the cinema, unfortunately.
I didn't see it in the cinema. No, I first saw it on VHS or
Oh,
on TV. So yeah, I kind of missed out seeing it on the big screen.
I really do wish that I'd seen them. What they should have really re-released the 2002 movie for the 20th anniversary of that, and they should release Monsters Unleashed. Ugh, they should just do re. I'm sure in America they have been somewhere, possibly, but in the UK we don't get nothing, so we're just gonna have to deal with that. But it's kind of sparked a little bit of a debate that I have in my mind because I always see stuff on Twitter, which is, like if the first live action movie is better, retweet if the second live action movie is better, and there's always a big debate on which one does reign supreme. So I wanted to get your mindset on that. Like, which movie have you preferred, and has it changed over the years?
So I've always preferred the second movie over the first one, but doesn't mean I hate the first one. I just preferred the second one due to the more monsters that were in it. But I prefer the CGI in the first movie because I feel like the second movie, the CGI wasn't really realistic for me. So it's like a balance between the two. Even though I prefer the performance and overall of the story in the second one, I still think the first one had better like animatronics and CGIs compared to the second one, even though it's like a 3 year difference.
See, that's an interesting take because I think that sets us up perfectly. Because I'm very much of the mindset that the first one is my absolute favorite, and I've always preferred it over the second one, even as a kid growing up now. So I think that puts us in a pretty good position to discuss and talk about the differences and similarities between the two movies. So I guess starting from the top down, the storyline. Thinking about the storyline of the second one, the gang split up. They could then go to Spooky Island where they need to resolve the mystery, which turns out to be Scrappy Doo masterminding the whole thing to release the monsters. And then the second one, of course, Scooby and Shaggy want to prove themselves to be great detectives. Some shenanigans happen, and monsters end up being unleashed that they have to then put back. Now, out of those two storylines, which one appeals to you more? And why? I mean, I'm taking it that for the most part of these, you will lay on the side of Monsters Unleashed, but I guess what's your kind of what resonates with you more about that?
Well, if we take the first movie, you see the gang split up and then be forced to reunite because that's Scrappy's major plan for revenge. Because then we see highlights of how he was treated. So Scrappy was actually treated very poorly, like being
Hmm.
abandoned, which normally you wouldn't think the gang would do that. But then it's like a second, like, you're looking from the first perspective, you're looking at it through Scrappy's eyes in a way. So he feels like he was abandoned, but he didn't take any credibility of how he acted. So the whole revenge plot was, I don't know, I didn't really feel like it was a good story. Because one is like you went all that deal to take over the world with your monster army, only to then bring the gang, which you know are the one thing that could destroy your chances of conquering the world, just for an ounce of revenge on Scooby Doo. And I just feel like the revenge bit didn't really make any sense. You had your revenge, you controlled the world, you had, so many people under your control. You didn't really need the gang. You could have took them one at a time and, invited them instead of bringing them all together. So the story I just felt like it was a good plot. Like, don't get me wrong, but I feel like the execution just didn't really feel like it too much. Because remember, the old Scooby ones are more towards the adults rather than the kids. But the monsters in the first one looked more realistic and more like monstrous because that's why I like the old animatronics. It's back in 2001, so they were still using animatronics, stand-in, stuntman, and newly CGI at the time. So it looked 10 times better. But then we got the second movie, which is again, like you said, like Scooby and Shaggy want to prove themselves that they can be detectives, even though they're the ones who caused the monsters to get resurrected anyway. So even though they try to do something good, they end up being the problem down the line. So it's more like you're focused on them trying to find themselves in a way. Of course, we see the whole, plot with the villains and all that with the bar, which I thought was very good, bring back
Yeah.
old villains as a way to show like, oh, okay, maybe they do get along to some extent, but they all have the same agenda about hating the Scooby Doo gang. So it just like opens up more doors, like who's the real villain. But yeah, the story in the second one I really like. I feel like it added more to the surroundings. It's not only just revenge, you also see the villain side. You see Velma's love interest, you got Daphne and Fred. They all have their own different roles to play. Whereas in the first one, it was mostly focused on Scooby and Shaggy and getting Scooby to be all alone, to be sacrificed. So I feel like the second one definitely was an upscale, but I feel like the CGI was the worst because if you look at all the monsters, they didn't really look realistic, like terrifying monsters. Because you brought them to life, they would look like the real deal, but they looked more like the cartoon variants. So they didn't really scream terror like the first one, and that's because they used all CGI, and maybe the Dark Knight was the only one that was half in suit and half not. If you look behind the
Hmm.
scenes, so I feel like it didn't really capitate, like didn't really stand out the most. I feel like that was the bit that ruined the film for me. I feel like the CGI was the poorest, and then I think the only funny bit I liked was the cotton candy because that had to be CGI. But I feel like that was the only one that died in the entire movie that got killed. If you think about it, no one's actually died in any of the Scooby Doo movies except for the cotton candy floss monster.
Unless I suppose the suit could have suddenly appeared in Shaggy and Scooby's stomachs,
Yeah,
right?
see,
Like
that's
where
yeah,
they were
because
digesting cotton candy.
nothing
Now it's just
was left.
fabric.
That's nothing that's left. It's like to this day, I'm thinking it's probably a murder. It was like the
Mm.
first villain they can actually devour.
I mean, it's kind of weird that you said that because all throughout I was willing to go to bat for the first movie, and I stand by that. Now that I look at things from what you've just said, from my point of view, I believe that 2002 had a weaker story. I just personally loved exactly how it was executed versus the second one, which I can see was a lot more concise. I just didn't really, how it was executed wasn't really my thing. Because just thinking about what you just said, like, you're absolutely right. 2002, I love it. I don't mind Scrappy being the villain just because I wasn't expecting that as a kid. I thought it was a brave move. I didn't know James Gunn was just anti-Scrappy, but from that point of view, it's kind of like you do, even if you don't like Scrappy, you can acknowledge that the Mystery Inc. gang really didn't treat him well, and even though he was being a complete pain in the neck, it was the wrong thing for them to do to completely abandon him. So we can't really get on Mystery Inc.'s side for the most part of the first movie, and even then, 1,000,000,000%, Scrappy only needed Scooby, and he sent different people, like he sent the island of Misery to all the individual gang members, knowing that he knew that that they'd all split up. So really, they could have only targeted Shaggy and Scooby. They've got the pure soul in Scooby. That's it, because they know that Shaggy and Scooby can't be separated. And other than that, the rest of the gang would have been affected if the whole world had been taken over anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're 100% right in that there's some gaping holes in the story of the first movie, 100%. And I'm just trying to think if there's that equivalent for the second one. I mean, it's certainly a Mystery Inc. that we can all get behind. Like they don't do anything morally ambiguous to trigger the events of the second movie. But again, it's just about execution for me. But you did touch on a good point, which, we've got onto the story, but a good story, the backbone of it is the villain. And you said that you did prefer how the first villains looked. But in terms of, we always go back to nostalgia bait nowadays. Do you feel like bringing back all the villains or a lot of the popular villains for the second movie was maybe leaning a bit too heavy into nostalgia, or do you think that they did that to a point where it still made sense?
Well, I feel like it made some sense bringing in the villains, like the villains bar, because I don't know. It's a felt that one a bit like, what do the villains do after they get released from prison? And then there's a bar where they all get together and share their frustration against the Mystery Inc. gang. And you could see that when they're throwing darts at the board and all that. And I really like the comedy bit as well. When they go, it's Norfolk Shaggy Rogers. Where? There.
Yeah, dude's beatnik best pal. Like,
Yes.
I mean, I will say the faux ghost in the second movie is an absolute highlight. Everything that I loved about the edge of the first movie is brought out in some scenes, not a lot in the second movie, mind you, but in one of them is the faux ghost. Like that just has like the writing of James Gunn all over it. Like you could imagine something like that being in a Guardians movie. In all honesty, it's so good. And I do always have this recurring joke that they've got Mystery Inc. Whack-A-Mole, they've got Mystery Inc. Darts. Goodness knows what the toilets look like. Like that's always my recurring joke with that scene.
But it
Um,
also makes sense bringing in the villains bar because the monsters that get brought back alive, none of the gang believe they're real. So there's going back on the whole assumption maybe they're the previous villains trying to team up. So that's why Shaggy and Scooby go to the bar to investigate. Because just in case if they are in it, but it's not. Because you only see them during that scene, they don't really make any more appearances. So I thought it was a nice way of showing it, even though the technically didn't need to, but they just threw it in there for the fans. But also as well,
yeah,
the monsters as well, because obviously we know most of them from the shows. But is the cotton candy floss monster from the comics? Because I can't remember
I
from the
don't
shows.
believe
I don't think it's in the
it
shows because
appears. The closest I see to it is literally just a visual nod, and it's kind of how the tar monster looks like in that one scene in Cyber Chase
yeah,
after Cyber Shaggy tricks him into the cotton candy machine. That's the closest I can find to a cotton candy glob. Other than that,
because I'm like, it's two
I
things. They
think
either
so.
threw it in because it's like something from the comics, or they threw it in just for for giggles to see Shaggy and Scooby have a monster they're not afraid of because it was just like the best scene. I still love that scene is when he announces himself as a cotton candy floss because I wouldn't be afraid of that monster. I'd be like, oh man, I could eat you.
I mean, this was around a similar time that What's New Scooby Doo was airing. I think they may have just been a bit too late to incorporate the Scooby Snack monster. But that would have been a better choice in terms
Yeah,
of like connecting to the shows because I still love that. What is it called? Is it called Snack Attack or something? I can't remember what the wait. Oh, it was on the tip of my tongue. But do you remember the episode where they go to like the Willy Wonka type Scooby Snack Factory?
yes.
I love that one. I'm just trying to think. I guess the ice cream phantoms they could have used. But yeah, ultimately, Cotton Candy Floss Monster isn't too bad. Do you have a favorite villain or couple of villains from Monsters Unleashed that are like that stand out to you?
See, it's weird. I like the Dark Knight. I thought he was the best looking design because I feel like they spent more work on the Dark Knight appearance rather than the rest of them. Like I don't know, it's like the other ones they're just barely on screen, and especially the boss fight. I feel like the Dark Knight had more screen time than
Yeah.
any other
Mm.
monster in there. There's like Captain Cutler. He was only in it for like
He just
two
like
or three
comes up
scenes.
from the water like,
Yeah,
ooh, and then
and he
that's
is
it.
so slow as well. It's like he only had one scene that was in the water. Other than that, he didn't really have any other part to play except for that water scene. I feel like at least the Dark Knight Ghost was in the mansion, had that you know gladiator fight with Fred, and he was still in the final boss battle. And I'm
And he
like,
was also like a right-hand man to the evil mask figure as well. Like they don't
yeah,
really use him as such, but he does often appear next to the evil masked figure. Now, I think you could argue he may not necessarily have been the best one to be teamed up with the evil masked figure, but I think they show him more than not because of the legacy thing. Like he was the first ever Scooby-Doo villain. So I think it does make perfect sense for him
yeah.
to be given more screen time. Like,
And the
and probably he's one of the
pterodactyl
cheaper
ghost
ones. Like, what was the thing?
looked
So
amazing.
I like the pterodactyl ghost a lot, and I'm glad that that was the intro because, like, I mean, we haven't even spoken about the intro. We don't really need to in great detail, but to this day, that pterodactyl ghost flying through Coolsville as the credits come up is still one of the most iconic opening title sequences for me. It's just crazy.
I love the first movie, the Scooby Doo movie's intro the uncut one. If you find it all on YouTube,
Mm.
that's the best one. And to this day, I don't understand why they cut it from all releases
No,
because
we on
it
the
would.
DVD, Roger Gosnell said that it would have taken away from the movie or timing, and I understand that to an extent, but it was a pretty short movie as it is. I
But
still think it
apparently,
could have
people
been
said
aired.
online that it was on the big screen in cinemas.
Really?
That original intro, apparently, but I never saw it in the cinema, so I
No.
can't actually credit it. But like, it was cut from more physical media releases and TV bits, and now it's like a bonus extra. But like in the intro, because how they done it was basically cartoon into the real live action. I thought that was really good. I still like the first movie's intro. I feel like it's the best introduction compared to the second one. I don't get me wrong, I like the pterodactyl one. I just feel like the first movie did it better.
I don't
And
know.
have
I
you
differ
noticed now
slightly.
with the Scooby Doo movies, they have all this like like cool funky introduction that's like 2 minutes long.
Oh yeah, like we got
Yeah,
the
like
crypto one,
yeah,
which was good.
it's the new norm now where they throw that in there and then it blends into the main movie towards the end of thing, and that's a good transition. We get a nice intro with good animations, a nice story to get you in the mood, and it transitions onto the actual beginning of the movie. And I feel like it started with the 2002 movie. I feel like that's what started it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because before with the Mook animations, they literally had more or less a prelude scene, a celebrity
Yeah,
singing the song, and then it just continued. I'm just trying to think what was the two flashback ones, Monster of Mexico and Legend of the Vampire. I'm just trying to think how they handled it. I know Legend of the Vampire started on a cruise ship. Oh, and Monster of Mexico. Yeah, you're right. Because again, those two were preludes. Because what we saw was El Chupacabra terrorizing that little dog. Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah.
an
So
interesting
I feel like
thought.
2002 started that.
Yeah, hmm. That's actually really cool. I mean, okay, let's talk about the channel for a bit because this is kind of connected to the monsters. So, about a year ago today, on the channel, we released the interview with Peter Crosman, which is still, I think that clip of the deleted monsters is still going up in terms of our most successful videos on the channel in total. But there was this discussion that happened where there were monsters like Redbeard's ghost, Chickenstein, that were going to be featured in the movie as more practical monsters. But in the end, the studios wanted to bring in more things like the 10,000 volt ghost and the tar monster as more CGI monsters. Do you think that the studio made the right decision in going down the CGI route, or do you wish that we'd gotten a bit more practicality in here?
See, if they went practicality, I would prefer less monsters because the amount of work that gets put in it. If they did it with the amount of monsters they did, the movie would have come out probably 2005 or 2006 because it would have took longer to film every shot. Because if you saw the Dinosaurs TV show, when they're in the suits now, they spent hours just for a certain scene. So I feel like doing a movie, they could be there for months or years just to do
Oh yeah,
one
like
movie, yeah. So if
crazy.
they were going to do full suits like they did mostly in the first movie, it would probably get delayed. And I don't think they wanted that. So I could see where the CGI was thrown in there because at the time, 2004, everyone was using CGI. Back, I think CGI was introduced in 2001, and it just kicked off there about using it. So everything was using CGI with animatronics with CGI. So I feel like they were going down the correct route using the CGI because it made the film at least somewhat better because they could do more stuff with the monsters. But I feel like the CGI at the time isn't as good as it was now. They did it now with the CGI and the capabilities of AI and everything. They can make the monsters look so realistic that it wouldn't even be noticed that it's all CGI. But back then, CGI just made it like as best as it could, like a blender. So they didn't really look like real monsters mostly, because some scenes you could see that they're just like cartoon variants for the kids. So it's like a
Yeah.
50. I felt like the Dark Knight was the only one, or the Pterodactyl one, were the only ones that looked really good. I felt like they were the most money put in. I think the other monsters, because you see all the images that they post in that of what they could add on, because there's like there's a book there's a Monsters Unleashed book that has all the monsters and all the details in.
Do you
So yeah,
have that? I want to get my hands on that one so bad.
no, I don't have it, but you can get it on eBay. But it has like the whole of Monsters Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
Um, I guess it's like not very necessary for collectors, but at least it shows monsters that could have been in there and whatnot. So it's a I know, just gives that a bit more edge. But there's also all these as well. I'm ready to see all the costumes for most of the monsters that would have been. Because you know when they walk into the museum, all the monsters and that, there were meant to be many more that weren't shown on screen. So just look at the images now. It's just like they could have really done some good ones, but with the budget and with CGI, I'm glad they didn't do. I think they chose six monsters. And I think they chose the most iconic ones based on most rated watching on TV statistics. So the Dark Knight had to be a main one because
Yeah.
it's the first ever pilot episode. The Pterodactyl Ghost was another good touch. So
My only
again,
criticism would be that it was the zombie and not the creeper, just because I think that the creeper was a lot more iconic and really for function and
yeah,
aesthetic, they both would have been very similar.
the zombie is a sidekick.
Yeah, to the witch, I think.
Yeah,
Was
so
it
the
the
witch
Ozark
is,
witch?
but they didn't have the witch. I'm like, so who's controlling the zombie? Because the zombie is a servant of the witch. So the witch is the main character, the protagonist, if you want to say. So they could have gone with the creeper, which again, the creeper is more iconic.
Yeah, I think that would have been a better choice. But other than that, like, I don't really have a thing either way. My thing has always been a middle ground. Like, I recently did rewatch the movie for the 20th anniversary, and one thing I'm thinking of was stakes and scope. Like, zombies, Spooky Island, I can forgive not showing much of the outside world because it was confined to the island. Part of the appeal was almost that intimate nature of the threat being quite personal to the gang, whereas we're in Coolsville, which is supposedly a main city in this one, and this is where I think the second one falls short for me on that promise ever so slightly, in that the scenes that I love are scenes that show the monsters truly being unleashed. So, for instance, that shot of Redbeard's ghost ship appearing in the sky while the tar monster terrorizes civilians in the cars, to me, that really is showing, wow, these monsters are actually unleashed in the world, and who knows what could happen. But then that's kind of it. That's the last we see of the monsters in the actual outside world making mass panic. Like, I know that there's some sequences where you've got the zombie throwing up on the reporter, then also stealing the truck, and that's all well and good, but it's mainly confined to either a joke or how it will directly impact the gang. I think I would have liked to have seen, and I'm not sure if you've seen this, but there's concepts of that ghost pirate scene that shows creatures like the witch doctor and stuff running around the cars as well. I just think if they had one shot of some of these more practical monsters like Chickenstein, and Dr. Coffin, the Wiki Tiki Doctor, just running around the cars. They don't need to show them in great detail, but just knowing that if the gang don't get these monsters, they don't solve this problem, there's actual stakes to deal with. I think that would have made the world of good for me. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Just a middle ground where we can have practical monsters. You don't need to show them in great detail. I just want something to suggest, oh, if Scooby doesn't do this, it's gonna be a world problem, not just, I guess the gang's
Yeah.
gonna be in tar now.
And I think the tar monster is the most dangerous threat.
I see it, but I think I would be more scared of the 10,000 volt ghost. Because think about Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Oh God,
Just
yeah.
just a scene of Coolsville, all the lights going off. I don't know, cliche, yes, derivative, yes, but it would show the scope of what the monsters can do. Because the 10,000 volt ghost would be bad news. That's why I wish that that scene, for all it was a joke, I do kind of wish that we had the scene. I'm not sure if you've seen it on the DVD, but it's where the two security guards in the museum were kind of fooling around, and then the 10,000 volt ghost is the one to infiltrate the museum, to be the one to let the Black Knight ghost in to steal the rest of the costume. Just, oh, I don't know, stuff like that. I think would have been incredible.
Because some stuff got cut, so it's just like there's a lot of stuff that would have like the the sexy Velma, which is the meme that goes around. I thought that was great. Didn't really need it in there, but I thought it was great doing the whole makeup bit, and especially the material in the suit making it like squeaking out so it looks like she's farting.
I mean, the costumes are a great point to discuss next because, again, thinking about it, I think that this is another instance where I prefer the first movie because I think about what Fred's wearing, and if it isn't absolutely iconic and he's rocking it, it's stuff that is kind of inoffensive as far as design goes. Like it's either just in a beach tank top, you can ignore it. But then I think about Daphne and how great she looks in the boots and all the like the dresses and skirts that she's rocking. Similarly with the characterization of Velma. And then we get to the second one, and I think it's a lot more elaborate, but I don't vibe with Daphne's poncho or the big jacket that she's wearing at the end. I'm not vibing with anything that Fred's wearing. The only outfits that I really love is the one that Shaggy and Scooby wears to the Faux Ghost, where it's Shizzy McCreepy and SD McCrawley. There's one of Daphne's that I love, which was the one at the start. It's kind of like I don't know what the material is, but it's almost like a suede material. Other than that, and like like Velma's thing, like I'm not really vibing with the costumes in this movie. What was your take on that compared with the first movie anyway? Although I appreciate holiday movie, home movie, kind of different.
Yeah, because I'm not with you. The costumes and that, because they stepped aside from the iconic look and just made them wear anything that would, I don't know, resemble normal people, but try and have them the outfit at least match the color schemes in a certain way. So some of it was all right, but I felt like the party gathering bit, like that, those costumes that don't really suit them. Especially Daphne's one, I didn't really think that one was that great. It made her stand out because you're more focused on it, but it's wasn't I wasn't like amazed at it. I was like thinking that dress doesn't really suit Daphne.
No.
So I do prefer the costumes in the first one. But then again, the first one, there are some things that like I don't know. I feel like the best characters will always be Shaggy and Scooby. I feel like Fred was better in the second movie rather than the first. I don't know whether because he was a bit more like I don't know. He doesn't feel like Fred in the first one, but he felt more like Fred in the second one.
I can agree to that. I think it's because he not only has a direct antagonist within Heather Jasper Howe, but he also gets a lot more of the iconic scenes from that. Like, I think Coolsville sucks and stuff like that. Like that to this day is still iconic. So he definitely has a bit more to do in this one. But
Yeah, he had some funny scenes in the first movie, like the body switching one, which I thought was very great because that is like make like correct getting the voiceover to match perfectly when they switch bodies. I thought that was really good because you don't get to see that in movies nowadays. Like Face Off was the last movie that did something like that, but they kept them with the original voices. But I really liked how their souls swapped, but their voices matched their body. So like Shaggy would always sound like Shaggy, which regardless of whatever body was in. Which to me, that wouldn't really make any sense because if you think about it, if my soul was in your body and you were in my body, I'll still sound the same in my body if your soul was in here, and I would sound like
yeah,
you if
like the
my soul
vocal
was in. Yeah,
cords.
you wouldn't. Your vocal cords wouldn't change. So I'm just like, how? It's like I understand why they do it, so the people watching
Mhm.
know straight away that that's Shaggy, that's Fred. But for diehard fans, like you should have done it where like we would know based on how they act who they are. Like especially seeing Shaggy act as Fred, that was very good because I feel like that could like happen if they wanted to switch roles, and if Matthew ever wanted to play a leader, it's a possibility.
Yeah, like they all acted amazingly. I think that that's definitely something that you have to factor in a lot of these situations. I'm just trying to think about what other sequences you can discuss when comparing the two movies. I mean, the tone is a big one, and I think that is the main one for me. When I think about the
Act-
first one, I think it's like for adults, like, and you can clearly tell it was for adults, and they kind of had to make it a bit more
the
kiddie.
the first one's for adults as well because
The
there's a certain
second
element.
one, I just feel like it's great. You've got some gunnisms in the faux ghost and stuff, but ultimately the second one just always reads as a lot more of a kids movie to me.
Oh, but well, there was one scene in the second one with Shaggy drinking that potion
I mean,
when he became a woman.
ah,
And he was like, "Why am I so hot?" And drinks that when he gets really big and strong. Just and then Scooby becomes like really smart genius. And I thought that scene was hilarious. But I felt that the second one had a bit of humor towards the adults while also trying to cater for the kids. The first one was mostly just for the adults. Because you could tell by that movie, it was not. You really knew it wasn't for kids. To be fair, there was too much
yeah.
adult humor in there to begin with, and the amount of deleted scenes that were removed from it, like that's how much I had to cut it out because it was too obvious that it wasn't
I
for
think that's
kids.
why I like it because when I was watching it as a kid, at first I was like, "Oh wow, this is like dealing with some topics and there's some stuff in here that I haven't seen in any of the other movies that are supposedly meant for me." Like going back to that era, a Spy Kids or a Monsters Inc. or whatever you want to take from early 2000s kids movies. And then it was like, oh wow, I actually feel a bit wrong for watching this. It feels like I've accidentally been given something that I'm kind of getting away with here. So that's how I viewed it as a kid. And now looking back at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they put that in a kids movie. And this is stuff that I can understand now. Like, as a kid, I felt like I was getting away with something and I was excited to watch it because I liked it. And as an adult, I'm like, okay, there's stuff that they make references and jokes to that I can now understand. And I can also be baffled that they're not going to make another movie like this for kids anymore. Whereas the second movie, I liked it as a kid because I feel like it was like a Spy Kids. It was a great, highly produced kids movie. But now looking at it as an adult, I'm like, I don't really want to be watching a kids movie when I'm nearing 30 and like I've got jobs and stuff to worry about. Like I still love it. I think by today's standards, it's levels above any of the kids movies that are being like released now. But that's kind of my deal with it. It's great, but I think it's a bit more for kids. And unfortunately, contrary to the background's belief, I'm no longer a kid, so I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
I think the
know.
second one they had to make it so it's like a balance between the two. Whereas the first one, they knew you could watch all the latest things, you knew it's not for kids. It was for adults. It was for the older generation, and it still is now. So it
Yeah.
comes to the question like which one would I prefer?
Like I've
Even though
got
I
mates that still watch it before and after nights out at like university. Like it
because
is just like a party feel good movie.
yeah, because even though I like the second one, I still like the first one. Because like the first one's for adults, so I was like I can go watch it straight away. But the second one, I have to be in the mood. Do I want to watch a kids film that has slight adult humor? And that's what I think about. I don't hate it. I still do prefer the second one,
Mm.
but I've got a bit of mindset. It's like, do I want to sit through and watch this now? Because I'm 29, I'm almost 30. Like, do I want to? And I'm like, I'll watch Face Off instead because at least that's for an adult film. It's an 18. This is like I'm just there looking at scooters like unless it's like really if it's a first new movie release, I'll watch it. But then when it comes back to rewatching, I like it has to be really good, like Zombie Island. I can watch it because I know the humor's there. It's like more dark and towards a more older audience. Whereas Monster Unleashed, it's for kids, but then it has something for the adults watching with the kids. I think that's what they try to go with. So at least then it can appeal to both audience members, but it doesn't really mix that well.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Like obviously I do prefer the first one, but I think that's always going to be the case for me. I think it was too much of an important movie in my life. It defined me, which is weird to say. Like people watching this will know that it defined me not only in terms of Scooby fandom, and also like horror. It was like my first introduction to something that was a little bit, I want to say body horror, especially with the stuff that was going on with Mary Jane, like being in the mask and stuff like that. But also in other reasons that, for all I can on this show, I'm not going to go into other ways that it defines me. Leave that for the Q&A. But yeah, and I also know people. Um, Like I think what was it? It was Ashton that watched the second movie at a really important time, and so that got went on to define how he viewed the movie. So I think they're both absolutely fantastic. At the end of the day, I'd hold them both in high regards. To me, this is just like a discussion of, and again, if we had more of a viewer base, I'd get slated for this comparison. But for me, this is like trying to compare what's better, Romeo and Juliet or like Othello. Like they're both two things that I class as just being masterpieces for what they were. So it ultimately doesn't matter. I think they're both good, but I'll always prefer the first one. There's a little bit of like rumor debunking that I kind of just want to wrap things off by. One is a theory from NerdSync, and I really do like the video, but I go back and forth on how much I agree with this take or not. And that's that the movies are better if you treat the second one as the first one and the first one as the second one. What's your take on that viewpoint?
What, treat the first one as the second one?
Yeah, so like we start off, it's Coolsville Museum, monsters are unleashed, they then break up and go and get reunited on Spooky Island versus Release Order.
I think that would work better. I feel like what's really weird is that they do a live action, but they don't do like a classic scenario like Zombie Island. Because I feel like that as a live action would be the best. But it has to be for adults with horror and that. None of this, Return of Zombie Island bullshit. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like it's taking the concept and the work that was put into the first movie and copy and paste the style of it into the new ones. I feel like that would be a much more better audience because then at least the monsters look real. They put time and effort into the story. It's for adults, so there's going to be more messed up scenes, especially with Mary Jane's face. Like that was good because I wasn't expecting it the first time watching it. The way she just hits her head, I thought she was going to hit off and knocked out, and he wasn't going to know. I wasn't expecting her to be
Oh, yeah.
possessed, and the CJ back then put that mask on. Like I was used at the time, but when you look back now, it kind of looks like oh, that looks terrible. CGI.
It's freaky. It's uncanny. That's the thing. It's the uncanny valley. That's why that scene always used to freak me out. But yeah, I think in terms of switching the narratives, and this will be another hot take, but I think the biggest lie that Scooby Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed told is putting the 2 in the title. Because I really don't think it is a sequel or even a first one in any regards, just because apart from the same crew and same cast, there really isn't much connecting them when there could have been. Like for the second one, we could have had the Luna Ghost costume in the museum, or we could have had Old Man Smithers or Scrappy in the faux ghost. But I think because the first one, they had to change it so much, they wanted to make sure that the second one was so different that I can understand what NerdSync is saying. And I think in terms of Hollywood narrative, the second one does work better as the first one, but only as far as you've since in a lot of instances where the first one brings a lot of nostalgia. It's a more traditional story to bring in hardcore audiences and hardcore fans because it's based at the home and you've got a lot of familiar beats. Whereas the second one involves traveling somewhere and a more different experimental story. And we've seen that in stuff like Home Alone, to just choose something a bit arbitrary. The first movie is at home. But then, because it's the second movie, it's time to raise the stakes. Now we're in New York, and I can see it from that perspective. Like, first movie, we're in Coolsville. Second movie, now we're raising the stakes. We're traveling to somewhere. But that's kind of as far as I take it. I think Scooby Doo Monsters Unleashed would be a bit more of an honest title because really the two are as separate to each other as Curse of the Lake Monster and Monsters, Mystery Begins. They're just separate entities, in my opinion.
Well, I don't. So in the second Scooby Doo Monsters Unleashed, throughout the entire movie, they don't actually acknowledge the first movie. So there's no way of knowing throughout the entire movie
Mm.
that they're ahead of that timeline. Because when I look at it, I watch it like it acts more like a prequel rather than a sequel. It feels like it was the gang before they split up, before that moment. Because it doesn't really make any sense. You solved this. the Spooky Island incident, and now you got a museum of all your monsters. But it feels like it's in the wrong order, to be
It would have
fair.
been perfect if we did get the third movie,
I feel like they
because
called it
James
the
Gunn
second
said,
one as a mistake.
I don't
I
know, because the third one was going to be set in Scotland or somewhere in the UK, because that was going to be the storyline according to James Gunn. And at the end of the first movie, the reporter asked, "We've heard reports about a mudball ghoul terrorizing Europe. Like, what's your response to that?" Now, if we had got that third movie, I would say yes, that definitively really does put us in a situation where that Spooky Island movie is the second one. And there are other things like the deleted scene of Fred selling his book. That would make sense if they were of a high profile, that they've got all those fans waiting for them outside the museum and stuff like that. So there are things that I can see. But as it stands, apart from just Hollywood, how Hollywood tends to do movies, I don't
well,
really know.
they can come back and do a third one because that's because Matthew Lillard has said that he's open to do a third one if it's done by James Gunn and rated R for audiences. I think I might have the screenshot saved on my phone.
Well, they
Yeah.
can do it. I mean, we've
Yeah,
seen.
Matthew Lillard says that a R-rated Scooby Doo 3 movie with the original cast would be awesome, and even thinks Warner Bros. Would do it. So
I think they should do it.
he's even made.
They should do it. Now, I don't know about it being R-rated. I do think they should push for a PG-13 type thing, because there's going to be a lot of fans, especially if it is the OG cast, that will have grown up on the 2002, 2004 movies that are now, say, more R-rated than anything. But I don't know about necessarily wanting to alienate a more young audience, because that's like the spirit of that first movie. It was something for the kids to watch, and maybe they can feel like they're getting away with stuff. But we've even seen, like, look, literally, as of recording this, recent new movie, Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, which has uh three of the original Ghostbusters suiting up after so many years. I mean, I know that they did it for Afterlife, but if you can get those people suiting up, Matthew Lillard, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Linda Cardellini are definitely not too old to take on their roles. Maybe it would just have to be something a bit more legacy based. Like, we could have had like one of them, like, they could have kids. They're solving a mystery there, and like whatever it is. I do think there's definitely time, and I would love to see that third one.
Yeah, because it's like it's been like 20 years. And obviously you can tell Matthew's like not as young as he used to be, but he still looks good for his age. So I feel like they could still do one more movie, but like have it as like the one like the gang's last mystery until they go into retirement because they're old now. I feel like that would be a good story for the movie as they get together for one last mystery.
I mean,
But
we've made a BAM on this. Like, they could literally just shoot live action Zombie Island beat for beat, and you'd get the same story. Like, they've gone their separate ways because they've retired, maybe, and now this is the last horror. Like, let's try and find a story that's worth telling, which is why Daphne goes to Zombie Island in the original animation. Like, they could really have
which
to
I
rejig
liked
some things.
how they
That'd be
did that.
great.
It worked. Probably it's the best way. They left on mutual terms to come back for one last trip to help Daphne. I thought that was really good. But the way the first movie Scooby Doo did it was a bit like they had an argument and they split on bad terms. I thought that was the worst. But I guess it did help in the end because they were all trying to solve the mystery on their own without trying to help each other. But I never understood why. Okay, obviously Scooby and Shaggy went there because of the free food, but they already had food where they were. So I mean, it
I
was
guess though,
just
it's all you can eat though. You can't argue with all you can eat. The only thing that
technically,
would
technically,
like,
I swear they're banned from all you can eat.
yeah, I think there was
I
that
think
sequence. I
they,
don't know what it was, but
there
like,
there
hey,
was a
this is all you
scene
can eat.
when
Sorry,
they
no
mentioned that they're
professionals.
banned. Yeah, because they're now known to every all you can eat place.
Yeah, where was that on? Where
I
like someone says no professionals? Like,
yeah. Oh, I forgot what it was from, but it's from like the
no. If someone knows where that's from, comment that down below because I want to watch it. The thing is, my main staple, which again, a lot of people will disagree with this, maybe you'll disagree with this as well. It's okay, we all have our own opinions. But when they talk about original cast returning, I think this is someone that's easy to overlook in a world of movie stars appearing on screen. But I do feel like original cast should extend to all of the original cast, meaning Neil Fanning as Scooby Doo as well. Because do I think Neil Fanning is necessarily the best person to match for a Don Messick? Not necessarily. But I think the more gravelly look, the more gravelly sound of Neil Fanning as Scooby, I think it lent itself perfectly for the two roles, for the two movies, because it made Scooby sound a bit more like this is more of a real dog than an animated dog type thing. And so I do think he should return because I'd even say this for anything, like I don't think Neil Fanning's Scooby would work in a cyber chase or a stage fright, but it's perfect for live action, for the live action movies because of the tone of it. So I do think he should return if there is a third one, just because it even messes with my mind now thinking about, say, a Scott Innes or Frank Welker delivering some of the lines in a more mature setting. I don't know, but that's kind of my take on it as well.
Because then you can say the same could be said for the old voice actors for Shaggy as well. Because of that brief period before Matthew became Shaggy, there was someone else filling in for two
Yeah, you
movies.
had
I think it was for two movies. I forget who it's called now, but maybe we could have him as like a guest or something.
yeah, you had Billy West in Zombie Island, and through Witch's Ghost to Cyber Chase, you had Scott Innes,
Yeah.
and then it went back to Casey Kasem for the reunions, and then I believe from then out it's been. Oh no, Casey Kasem also did up until Samurai Sword, and then you had
And then
Matthew Lillard
I
as
think Matthew
far as
Lillard took
movies go.
I think he took it over
For
Samurai
series,
Sword.
Scott Menville did the Get a Clue show.
Did he?
Yeah, Shaggy and Scooby Doo Get a Clue. You had Scott Menville
Wait, let me have
there. I
Scooby
believe that's his only Shaggy role though.
Scooby Doo. Shaggy get a clue?
Is it on IMDb?
Who did you say?
Scott Menville, I think.
Yeah, he did voice Shaggy. There he is. Oh, that's weird. Why is that though? Because
I
Casey.
don't know. I think it sounds like they maybe, I mean, from voice matching, it sounds like they wanted a Matthew Lillard, but maybe at that point didn't feel like a Matthew Lillard would say yes. I mean, I like Scott Menville enough, but he is my least favorite voice of Shaggy.
Really?
But I don't think he's bad.
I love Matthew as the Shaggy.
No, Scott Menville's my least
Oh,
favorite. Shaggy's
well,
like Matthew Lillard's
Scott
like
was only in it for like he was only a temp, wasn't he? He wasn't really like he
yeah.
wasn't in it for
I
long.
mean, there's some that I can say, like, for instance, I think Scott Innes sounds the closest to Casey Kasem, but to a point where I don't think I view Scott Innes' Shaggy as his own Shaggy. It's just, oh, you've got a Casey Kasem voice match. Whereas Matthew Lillard doesn't, he sounds less like Casey Kasem than Scott Innes. But to me, he just puts his own stamp on it where you can tell it's Shaggy, but it isn't an impersonation. It is that's my Shaggy, you know. So there's different like thresholds for it. I'm sure we can discuss that at another time. But yeah, I guess that does wrap this up. Happy 20th anniversary to Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. Mark, where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
You can find me on social media at Twitter at IgosLuigi, Instagram at MarkMarsh94, or my YouTube channel, Mark Marsh, and also twitch.tv/IgosLuigi for all the latest.
Hey, and you can find me nowhere. So yeah, do with that information what
I
you
forgot, yeah,
will.
you're not on social media no
No, you know what I mean? Kicking
more.
back in
I got
retirement.
social media, but like, I mainly respond quicker to YouTube. To this day, I
I
don't know
love
what I'm
YouTube.
using Twitter or Instagram for. I have it,
I know.
but
I think it's to chat up women.
oh no, it's just a dating bit for me. I just noticed
Yeah.
as well the Mortal Kombat Legends Battle of the Realms. He did a voice cameo. He did as Shaggy in it.
Oh,
I just,
that is crazy. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.